now we are ready for something as important as conversation, to listen. Because for the next hour or so, we have 3 keynotes by 3 really amazing speakers. And last year, as I had just presented this amazing speaker, Lynn Rothschild, on this stage, biologist at NASA, I was standing down there in the crowd and I was completely caught up. And this guy walked by with his bike, and he had definitely had a few beers. And he stopped and he looked completely puzzled, and he was like, oh, all these people are listening to a talk about plants in space? And I was like, yes, it's so amazing. And he was right. But it is really amazing seeing all of you here, because this is what we should talk about, and this is what we should listen to, these amazing keynotes and these amazing speakers. This evening, I look forward to welcome, in just a second, Chris Messina, talking about new ways of social, Payal Arora, talking about the next billion users, and Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. It's going to be a good night. So first, Chris Messina. In 2007, Chris invented the hashtag, and I've just learned the reason it looks like it does is that it was one of the only available 2 keys on his cell phone, because at that time you used the numeric keys to write text and SMS. And he created the hashtag as a solution for how to group messages and trends and events on Twitter, and it became much more important than he could have imagined. Hashtags are driving conversations and engaging people in important issues. But in our race to make the world more logical, more programmable, something essential is missing. Computers have become easier to use, and conversations are now kind of resembling the way we communicate, humans. But they've also become kind of seductive, exploiting human weaknesses. So how do we prevent tech from becoming an enemy to our human nature and relationships? Chris believes the only way to bring about the future that we deserve and desire is to start now by changing the culture of founders and makers in order to have large-scale, lasting downstream effects. Please welcome Chris Messina.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to wait for my slides. Actually, the slides are right here. Okay, perfect. I've just discovered that this is my first time in Copenhagen, and so I'm actually really excited to be here. This is the first time I've given a talk in the rain, and so I just want to acknowledge all of you who are on the outsides getting moist and wet. I understand it's probably a challenging experience, but thank you for bearing with me. So I see you, because I was standing there last night, and it was challenging. Okay, so my story starts back in 1998. I knew that social technology was going to be a really big deal when I was in high school. But what I hadn't realized was that not everyone had come to the same conclusion as me. I built a website for a gay-straight alliance, a club that it turned out was banned. I ended up getting suspended from school and almost didn't graduate. All I wanted to do was connect people to this new platform that I discovered called the web. And instead, I got the boot. Turned out my high school wasn't exactly the best place to become an entrepreneur in social technology. Fast forward to San Francisco in 2005. I made my way out there after graduating, and I found a bunch of like-minded people who were excited about the future, who wanted to build social products, who wanted to contribute to the world and make it a better place. Some of them would end up going on to build household names, such as WordPress, Flickr, Twitter, Instagram, and Slack. These are my friends. As was said, my own contribution to the era that became known as Web 2.0 was the humble hashtag. This is my tweet from 2007. After I proposed this idea on Twitter, I brought this idea to Twitter's headquarters because they didn't have security. I walked in the front door, and this is me taking a photo holding a Wired because I was so excited to meet these guys. I know, right? It was like my total fanboy moment. This is Jack. When he was still an engineer, he wasn't CEO yet. And Biz was a co-founder, and that look was basically the look he gave me when I proposed the idea of the hashtag to him. He was like, thanks, Chris, but this is never going to work. And I was like, okay, darn. And so I left. Now, fast forward a little bit from 2005 to this year, and something interesting has happened. Social media took over. And at least in the United States, and I know this is true in a lot of places around the world, the penetration of social media has become enormous. And more importantly, a younger generation is growing up using social media every day, all the time, connected with everyone in their lives. And the hashtag kind of came along, kind of like a barnacle and a whale. To the point, or the tune, of over 200 million hashtags used per day, or, put another way, 23 hashtags every second. This is a number that I can't even fathom. And yet, as I've been talking, there have been millions of hashtags that have been created. And this is only on Twitter. This doesn't count Facebook or Instagram or anyplace else. The use of the hashtag has been used in lots of different social movements recently, from the Arab Spring, to Black Lives Matter, to the Me Too movement. And the products that we started building to enable people to connect through social technology was started back in 2005, 2006, and I was there. I was part of that movement. But it's impossible to look at that success and not also think about some of the negative consequences that have arisen alongside the adoption of smartphones and social media. And of course, this is stuff that Asa talked about last night. But some of the problems that have come up, I believe, are the result of translating complex human actions into their digital equivalents. For example, the like button. If you're a designer, it's pretty easy to imagine creating some sort of product that allows people to express their affinity for things that they encounter in the world that they like, right? It might look something like this. The problem with this like button, though, is that when you introduce it into a commercial context, like a Facebook page, the meaning starts to change. When I like something, is it that I'm trying to say that I enjoy it? Am I trying to tell my friends that this is something that I'm into? Do I want to receive updates in the future in my newsfeed? What exactly does this simple thing actually mean? This type of confusion abounds in social products. And even with the addition of things like stickers and emoji and GIFs to give us more fidelity to communicate with one another, it still can be really hard to know exactly what we're trying to communicate to each other. And so, for example, if you consider the same emoji across different cell phone makers' products, you can see how this confusion might actually occur. This is all the same thing, by the way, just so you're clear. And it's not like we're not trying. We are really trying to communicate and to connect through all of these social technologies. But because we must translate these complex ideas, these things that we previously have had in-person social cues to help understand us, something is being lost in translation. And so what might have been meant as an offhand comment or a joke can sometimes come off as mean or can be misinterpreted and can escalate very quickly. If you compound those effects over time, in our race to connect everyone, we're now having to cope with a constant barrage of messages, notifications, and updates, which is changing the value of communication and cheapening it through digital media. And only recently have we really begun to start to understand how too much social media can be bad for us, with negative impacts on our emotions, our physical health, and our interpersonal relationships. Connection was a worthy goal, but connection alone is insufficient. What we really crave is social products and social technologies that support not just connection, but also comfort and security. And we learned this all the way back in the 1950s. This is not new information. We learned this when Harry Harlow demonstrated this through a series of monkey experiments. What he showed was that without comfort and security, primates become emotionally stunted, they develop antisocial and abusive behaviors, as you can see here. What his experiments showed was that even when wire mother monkeys provided food to a baby monkey, that monkey would still choose to spend 13 to 15 hours a day nestled into a cloth-covered wire monkey. These monkeys could tell the difference. And in our context, in many ways, our smartphones have taken the place of Harlow's wire monkeys. But they manipulate us into believing that we're getting comfort and security, but it's not real. And so when we spend too much time on our phones, we too develop antisocial behaviors like bullying, aggression, and depression. I think relationship expert Esther Perel has it right when she observed that people go to bed with their phones in all senses of the phrase. The last thing they stroke is their phone. The first thing they stroke is their phone. I can't imagine that doesn't have an effect. And indeed it does. It has many effects, in fact, many of which we heard from last night when Asa talked about them. This is just a list of effects that the Center for Humane Technologies put together. Coupled together, these things are starting to fray the fabric of society. And yet remember back in 2005 and 2006, our goal was to bring people together. This is not what we wanted. This is not what we were heading for. And lots of people who have built these things are starting to have their moments of mea culpas. You know, you have folks who again, co-founded Twitter, like Ev, wanted to fix the social media problem. You have Chris Weatherall, who was an engineer at Google, but also at Twitter, who implemented the retweet button, and now says that he basically handed a loaded weapon to a 4-year-old. You have Jack Dorsey using Twitter to talk about how bad Twitter can be. You have Roger Manamy, who is one of Zuckerberg's mentors, saying that the whole thing's broken. And then you have a co-founder of Facebook himself talking about breaking up the platform. So it's clear, especially from the people who have made these things, that we have problems. But the list of solutions that we have, I think, well, I'll run through a few of them. One of the first class and most obvious ways of solving some of these problems is to fix the products themselves. And curiously enough, I think actually Instagram has been ahead in trying to push out more of these features to fix their product. This is a new sticker that they just announced or launched recently to basically bring up a stance against bullying. It's very small, very incremental, but you know, it's something. Of course, they've also started testing the removal of like counts. Not likes entirely, but counts, in a way to get people to hopefully focus more on the interactions between humans as opposed to numbers to optimize. Twitter is providing more tools to provide ways of reporting harassment to give people more control over the conversations they're having. And Telegram, a messaging client, recently introduced a new feature to actually throttle the speed with which people can share messages to a group in a desire, I think, to improve the coherence of conversations. And WhatsApp also realized that information was being shared over many, many hops, oftentimes false or inflammatory information, possibly contributing to genocide in Myanmar. And so WhatsApp also made changes to reduce the amount that information could spread. So that's a set of solutions for fixing the products. There's also the opportunity to build new products with a new understanding of social platforms. One of those, of course, is YouTube trying to segment out a younger population into a new app called YouTube Kids. And they've just paid a big fine for this, so maybe there's another reason for them doing this. And then Instagram, of course, is always chasing after Snapchat, and so they are now building a new app that they could have called Streaks, but of course, based on something I'll tell you in a minute, they might not need to do that. So those are new products. There's also the opportunity to regulate the companies. And this is something that I think is very controversial, but it's starting to become a part of the conversation. In the United States, we have a presidential candidate who is essentially proposing that we break up the big tech companies. That's Elizabeth Warren. A couple years ago, this wasn't even part of the conversation. And this guy, Josh Hawley, is taking a more moderate approach with something called the Social Media Addiction Reduction Technology Act, or SMART Act, which I think is actually not too smart. But in it, he would actually outlaw and ban things like the infinite scroll, or streaks, or autoplay on YouTube. And so the intention might be good, but the solution and the remedy, I think, doesn't actually make sense if you think about the long arc of social technology. And even Facebook itself is proposing ways in which it could be regulated in order to cause it and other of its competitors to behave better. So these are all good starts. This is a conversation that wasn't even happening a year or 2 years ago. But it begs the question, is this sufficient? Is this enough? Will this actually bring about the changes that we need? Because to me, the product changes are incremental. The new products might be incremental. Regulation might help, but that's going to take a long time to come into effect. And by then, we're going to be talking to our computers and spending lots of time in virtual reality. So they might even be irrelevant. I think we really need to be thinking more systemically. Something broader, something deeper. In fact, we must go deeper. Because here's what we're up against. I'm going to play a clip from Sean Parker. How many of you guys know who Sean Parker is? A few of you. Okay, Sean Parker was the guy that gave us Napster, but he also was one of the first presidents of Facebook. And I want you to listen to what he says in this clip.
You know, if the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop that it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I think that the inventors, creators, and it's me, it's Mark, it's Kevin Systrom at Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
Oh, no.
We did it anyway. Think about the moral depravity to basically say, I'm going to hack all the humans around me to make them my guinea pigs or my rhesus monkey in my experiment. Do you think any of the solutions that I propose are going to deal with this? I'm not so sure that they will. And there's an increasing amount of importance and urgency to actually address the underlying issue. The goal isn't just to fix social media or big tech. I think the answer lies in fixing us. It took us 30 years to connect the first 50% of the world's population to the internet, and according to the UN, it's only going to take another 10 to connect that last 50%. If we want the future of social technology to be different than the current environment that we're living in, we really have our work cut out for us. Because think about it this way. 10 years ago, Instagram didn't exist. Now it has over 1 billion users. Think about the number of Instagrams that will be created between now and 2030. And what's going to determine or define the values and principles that guide those products? And consider the impact of those new Instagrams on the world that is currently not connected to the internet. These are people who have never been connected and are getting this for the first time. They are not inoculated like we are against a lot of the power of social media on our consciousness. And yet many of us are still susceptible to these things. Think about the impact on those communities. I'm terrified of what's going to happen if we don't change the underlying cultural issues that got us to where we are now. We have to think about the creators of those technologies and whether or not they're going to consider the human needs of comfort and security in the products that they're building. Because in 10 to 15 years from now, we're going to be living with extraordinarily powerful technologies, social technologies that are far more seductive and compelling than the ones that we're living with today. And I don't want to be thinking 15 years in the future, oh my God, I wish we had done something in 2019. But shucks, we didn't. So how are we going to do this? Well, as a founder myself, I understand that building a company is one way to scale change. Absolutely. But I actually think that doing this on a broader base level is necessary, and that means changing the culture of founders themselves. Since I was there at the beginning of the first wave of social technology, I know how culture informs and changes decisions. Thanks to the hashtag, I also see how culture and the culture of founders and creators is transmitted downstream to users in ways that we never anticipated or intended. My job here today is simply to provide awareness. It's simply to give you a choice about how you might spend the next 15 years trying to get us to a possibly better outcome than where we find ourselves. Now, founders, like many of you in this room, makers, creators, people who want to build things for people, are kind of like artists in that we want to reflect ourselves in the things that we make. And here's how that plays out. You take the founder's culture, any of our culture, frankly. That culture defines our values, defines the way that we think about things, the way that we believe things. Those values influence our product design choices, how the like button works, for example, how the retweet button works, whether it's actually built into the product or not. And those cumulative design choices end up defining the founders' products. So as the founders' products become more widely adopted in culture, like Facebook and Twitter, they have an impact, and a cumulative impact on users' behaviors, which then eventually shifts cultural behavior at large. I can't go down the street now without thinking about a vertical photo being taken for a story. Most of my thoughts are 140 and now roughly 280 characters long. I can't think beyond that. Social media has changed my very consciousness. And it all started from the founding culture's norms. And so it seems obvious, but in retrospect, this is one of the things that I've learned, that founders' products ultimately propagate their culture. And so to make this more tangible, actually, Mike Butcher is here somewhere in the audience. This is a photo of Jack Dorsey, way back in the day. This is Jack, Pirate Jack, I suppose. The idea for Twitter came to him because he was a bike messenger. He wasn't just an engineer, but he was also a social activist. And free speech was something that was very important to him and to a lot of people around him in the early days. What he realized was that SMS was going to be this new amazing broadcast channel for sharing what he was doing with his friends. And because Twitter valued free speech from the beginning, it partially explains why Twitter was one of the last platforms to kick off Alex Jones, the controversial television host, or conspiracy theorist, I should say. It's also why, back in November of 2017, Twitter refused to kick off Trump, even though he was the bullying commander-in-chief, because they deemed his tweets to be newsworthy. And this is a really tough line to ride, but because, again, free speech was so important to Jack and the founders, the content stayed. And only recently did they modify the policies to make it harder to at least find that content, even if they keep it up. And so as Twitter has become more important as a source of news, it's changed culture at large. It's changed the way that we think, it's changed the way we talk, it's changed the way that we relate. And so Jack's culture has affected all of us. Now this effect also is not new. John Polkin, who was a contemporary of Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist, said that we shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. And so we need to make foundational changes. The good news is some of us have already started. I want to introduce you to Dr. Emily Arnold and Alexa Meyer, who are building a new company called Beam. They are focused on the mental fitness and overall emotional wellness of founders. They're building an in-person community where people can go and find a therapist, or take classes on emotional wellness and leadership topics, or find others who are committed to working on themselves. They're building a gym for mental fitness. And they're specifically focused on founders because they understand that therapy and mental wellness can improve the effectiveness of leaders and CEOs by helping them to become more self-aware and emotionally intelligent, which are skills that are absolutely necessary for actually working with people and building products that care for people. In fact, they're dog-fooding this, and I don't know if you guys have ever gone to your own therapy or been in couples counseling, but as co-founders, they are going to therapy and doing that extra work. And I think this is a really good sign. One of their investors is Neil Devani, and he is putting his time, money, energy, and resources to support founders like Emily and Alexa, because he believes that the development of whole human founders is necessary to make the change that I've been talking about. Emily and Alexa are super excited to work with him because he understands that this is an ecosystem problem. Neil also understands that the startup game is a marathon and not a sprint. And from an investor perspective, this is actually a very smart strategy to take because investments often fail to founder burnout. And so building more emotionally resilient humans actually is better for his bottom line. And on the product side, Ross Ingram and Christina Poindexter are based out of LA, and they are building something called Maslow. Maslow is a sort of AI companion that enables emotionally intelligent behavior in software because it emulates empathy through visual cues. So what does this mean? Well, this is Maslow. Maslow is this orb that can mirror emotional states that it detects in people in their voice or in their face or things like that. And you can see kind of how this works. This is Maslow expressing joy. This is when Maslow's amused. And when Maslow is surprised. And this is the kind of emotionally intelligent software that can possibly make our technology actually more responsive to us as humans. Now these folks are And these folks are what I think of as a new class of emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs, ushering in what I hope will be a new wave of startups that promote human flourishing. And what I'm hoping is that those Instagrams that I talked about that are coming in the next 10 years are fundamentally culturally aligned with these folks. And we have to get this right, and I think we will if we start now. If you remember at the beginning of my talk, when I talked about getting kicked out of high school, right? I'm here today to share a lesson that it took me 15 years to figure out. Because I started my journey in social technology a long time ago. And if I could go back and have a conversation with myself then, now, as a founder, as someone who's had the experiences that I've had, I would, of course, tell myself to look into design, computers, technology, and all that stuff.
It's a party bus!
Okay, moving right along. This is good because one of the things that I've been working on is self-awareness, which is one of the technologies of myself, which also includes curiosity, empathy, better dance moves, shit like that, which, besides the dance moves, are all things that Emily and Alexa want to teach other founders. And so what I'm saying today should, I hope, be specifically relevant to a lot of young people in the audience, or anyone who despairs that social media is having a negative effect on us. And especially those of you who use hashtags every day and never thought for a moment that someone really no different than you might have actually come up with that idea and contributed to the social web as a way of giving more people the ability to find and share and connect with one another. I started my journey quite a while ago. A lot of you are just getting started now. Some of you are just restarting. But those of you who have grown up in social media, I believe, are in the best position to change it. And so if you don't like the way that you feel on social media, or you don't like the way that you see people treating each other on social media, you can change it by first developing the technology of yourself. And then once you've done that, I encourage you to go build the next Instagram, the next Twitter, the next Snapchat, the next YouTube, or something even better, but with a new culture and a new set of values to get us back on track, so we can continue building the technology of better humans.